Welcome back to the deep dive. All right, so today we're
Diving deep.
diving deep
Milk your
into
thirst.
head first into all the global fallout, all the reactions around the world from Trump's surprise return
Yeah.
to the White House. And
It's not just U.S. politics.
it's not just another US election recap. We're going to try to unpack how the world is reacting to this new era of, I don't even know what to call it, but
Trumpian diplomacy, they're calling it.
yeah, Trumpian diplomacy. And I gotta say,
Mixed reactions.
mixed reactions is an understatement.
Yeah.
We're talking like anxious whispers all over Europe, a surprisingly proactive Hungary, even some raised eyebrows, with our friends over in Ukraine. So,
A lot to cover.
yeah, a lot to cover. And our source, by the way, for this deep dive is this ebook. It's called The Global Ripple Effect, Analyzing the 2024 U.S. Election and Its Worldwide Impact.
Yeah, and I think, one thing that really jumps out is that Trump's victory, it seems to have thrown a real wrench in the global machine.
Oh.
It's like everyone's scrambling to figure out, what does this mean for us, for our own countries, and for our place in this, new world order type of thing?
Totally, yeah. And speaking of scrambling, Europe seems particularly on edge.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, the ebook puts it, some European leaders are practically biting their nails over this.
Yeah, well, French sources especially, they seem to be really worried about, a growing rift between the U.S. and Europe.
Interesting.
They're concerned about potential breakdown in communication, lack of cooperation,
Yeah.
especially with leaders like Macron, who,
Let's just say, didn't exactly have the best.
yeah, they didn't quite see eye to eye.
They didn't quite see eye to eye with Trump in the first term. You think this time is going to be different? I mean, could those, personal dynamics really impact something as big as, international relations?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, international diplomacy, it's often built on trust and personal relationships.
Yeah.
So when those relationships are strained, it can create a lot of uncertainty, makes it harder to find common ground. And it goes beyond just personalities too. You have real policy differences at play, especially when it comes to
Trump's America First agenda.
Yeah.
Oh, man, America First 2.0. I think everyone's wondering what that's actually going to look like, in practice.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest concerns is the potential economic impact. The ebook highlights how Trump's policies could really weaken the U.S. dollar's global dominance.
Really?
Imagine a world where the dollar isn't the default currency for international trade.
Whoa, that's big. What would that even look like? Would we all be using euros or yuan to buy our...
It's not that simple.
I know.
But it is a possibility. The euro and the Chinese yuan, they're definitely contenders to become more prominent global currencies. If that happens, it could have a huge impact on everything, from the prices we pay for goods to even, the stability of global financial markets.
So are we talking about a potential global currency war here? Is that on the horizon?
Well, maybe not a full-blown war.
Okay.
But definitely some intense competition. The ebook even mentions the possibility of Trump using incentives to lure European companies to relocate to the U.S.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, specifically Texas, where energy costs are lower.
Oh, that makes sense.
So it's like a corporate tug of war
with
countries just battling it out for economic dominance.
So what does all of this mean for the average person? Someone who's just trying to live their life, buy groceries and...
Yeah, that's the key question, right?
Yeah.
These global shifts in power, in economics, they inevitably trickle down and affect our daily lives. It could mean changes in prices for everyday things, shifts in job markets.
Oh, yeah.
Even the availability of certain products.
Okay, so basically we're all feeling the ripple effects, whether we realize it or not. It's pretty intense when you think about it. Speaking of intense, this whole energy situation is getting really interesting. The ebook, they're calling it a new kind of arms race.
Right.
But not with weapons, with energy tech.
Yeah. That was a fascinating point. There's a growing concern that the U.S. might make major leaps forward in nuclear energy under Trump, leaving Europe scrambling to catch up.
Oh, I can picture it, countries racing to develop these new energy sources,
Yeah.
forming new alliances, maybe even clashing over resources. It's like a whole new geopolitical chessboard.
Absolutely.
And speaking of unexpected alliances, can we talk about this whole Trump-Musk dynamic? I mean, who saw that coming?
Right. I mean, it is an odd pairing.
Yeah.
But despite that initial surprise, the ebook actually suggests that their alliance, it might be more fragile than it appears.
Really? Why is that?
Well, Musk, he's known for his radical ideas. He's been pushing for things like shrinking the federal workforce, through his proposed Department of Government Efficiency.
I mean, can you imagine being a fly on the wall in a meeting between those two? Talk about a clash of personalities. But, I mean, wouldn't Trump also be all about efficiency?
Oh, for sure, he values efficiency.
Right.
But he's also known for his pragmatic approach. So he might not be as eager to embrace some of Musk's more radical ideas,
Right.
which could lead to some interesting clashes within their alliance.
Okay, so we've got Europe on edge, a potential energy arms race brewing, and this Trump-Musk power dynamic that could go either way. What a roller coaster. But what about Ukraine? How are they reacting to all of this, especially given Trump's past comments about Crimea?
Yeah, Ukraine is definitely watching this situation very closely.
Right.
And with a good dose of anxiety.
Yeah.
The ebook highlights how Zelensky's administration is deeply concerned about potential reductions in U.S. military and financial support.
Especially with Trump's previous statement, Crimea is gone.
Right.
I mean, what kind of signal does that send for Ukraine's future?
It creates a lot of uncertainty, to say the least.
For sure.
Yeah, the possibility of reduced U.S. support could embolden Russia, making an already tense situation even more volatile.
So while Ukraine is kind of holding its breath, there's another country that's stepping up in a surprising way.
So, yeah. Hungary. The ebook mentions they're trying to play peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine.
Yes. Yes, it's a bold move. Prime Minister Orban is making efforts to mediate between the two countries.
Wow.
It's a long shot, but it does reflect a strong desire for stability, for dialogue within Europe.
Yeah, that's interesting that they're taking this initiative, but with Trump's America First agenda seemingly back in full swing, does this signal a shift in the global power balance? What about the role of China and Russia in all of this?
Yeah, that's a critical question and one that has a lot of people worried.
I imagine.
The ebook cites French sources who are warning that Trump's inward focus could create a void in global leadership,
Oh.
a void that China and Russia are more than ready to fill.
Okay, so while the U.S. kind of steps back, China and Russia step up, I mean, what are the potential consequences of that?
Well, it could allow China to expand its influence in key regions like Africa and Southeast Asia.
Potentially challenging U.S. dominance in those areas. It could also embolden Russia, potentially leading to further aggression on the world stage.
So we're talking about a potential power shift of epic proportions. And at the center of it all is this, this unpredictable force, Trumpian diplomacy. What exactly does that even mean?
It's a style of diplomacy that's often characterized by unpredictability. A focus on bilateral deals.
Interesting.
And a willingness to challenge kind of traditional norms.
Yeah.
So it's an approach that can be both disruptive and effective. It really just depends on the situation.
So basically, the whole world is on a diplomatic tightrope, trying to figure out how to navigate this new reality. This Trump victory, it has thrown a major wrench into the global machine. And it's going to be fascinating and maybe a little terrifying to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. It's a time of great uncertainty, but it's also a time of opportunity, right?
Yeah.
The old rules of the game, they're being rewritten. New alliances and partnerships are emerging. It's a truly dynamic moment in history.
Yeah, it really is. Welcome back to our deep dive, into the global ripple effects of the 2024 U.S. election. So far, we've uncovered some pretty significant anxieties around the globe, from a potential currency shakeup to the possibility of Europe, falling behind in this energy tech race.
Yeah, and we can't forget about that unexpected Trump-Musk alliance.
Oh, right.
It's definitely one for the history books.
Oh, yeah. I'm still trying to picture those two in a room together, hashing out policy. But speaking of policy, there's another area I wanted to explore. The impact on international organizations, like the UN, NATO, the World Bank, those big players on the global stage.
Ah, yes. Those
Yeah.
institutions, they're crucial for international cooperation.
Right.
But they've also been a frequent target of Trump's criticism.
Right.
He's called them inefficient,
Yeah.
claimed they work against American interests,
Right.
even threatened to pull the U.S. out of some of them.
Exactly. And with his America First policy back in play, there's a real concern that he might actually follow through on those threats this time around.
Yeah, it's a valid concern. The source even quotes a German political analyst who calls it a potential wrecking ball to the global order.
A wrecking ball, that's a pretty stark image.
So let's say the U.S. does start to withdraw from these organizations. What happens then? What does it mean for global cooperation and stability?
Well, for one thing, it could create a leadership vacuum,
Yeah.
right? The U.S. has historically played a major role in shaping the agendas and actions of these organizations. It's
Right.
been a driving force, both financially and politically.
It's like the captain of the ship suddenly abandoning the helm.
Exactly. And without that strong U.S. presence, it's unclear who would step up to fill that void. It could lead to a more fragmented, less effective global system
Oh, wow.
where countries are less willing to cooperate and more likely to go it alone.
And potentially more prone to conflict?
It's a definite possibility. If countries feel like their interests aren't being represented,
Yeah.
or that these organizations are no longer serving their needs.
Yeah. They might be less inclined to work together to solve global problems. It could also create opportunities for countries like China and Russia, who have their own visions for a new world order, to
Yeah.
exert more influence.
So we've got potential economic upheaval, a new energy arms race, and now like a weakening of international institutions. It's starting to feel like a recipe for global instability, isn't it? Is there any good news in all of this?
Well, it's not all doom and gloom. One potential silver lining is that this period of uncertainty, it could force countries to rethink their alliances and partnerships. It's like shaking up a snow globe and seeing where the flakes land.
Kind of like a global reset button, a chance
Right.
to, create new connections and build a more resilient global network.
Exactly. We might see new alliances forming based on shared interests and values, rather than those traditional geopolitical blocks.
So instead of just blindly following the U.S., countries might start to chart their own course,
Right.
forging new paths, building relationships that, better serve their needs.
Yes, and that could lead to a more diverse and balanced global landscape. For example, we might see stronger regional partnerships emerging in areas like Africa and Southeast Asia,
Interesting.
where countries are coming together to address common challenges and create opportunities for growth.
So more collaboration on a local level,
Yeah,
even if there's less cooperation on the global stage, it's kind of like a rebalancing of power with different players stepping up to fill the void.
that's one way to look at it, yeah. It's all about adapting to a changing world order and finding new ways to cooperate and thrive. And it's not just governments that are adapting either. We're also seeing businesses and individuals taking a more active role in shaping the future.
It's like everyone's realizing that they have a stake in this game,
Yeah.
and they're not afraid to step up and play their part. Speaking of stepping up, I wanted to touch on another critical issue that often gets overshadowed by all the political turmoil: climate change.
Ah, yes. A global challenge that demands global cooperation. Something that might be harder to achieve in this new era of America First, right?
Exactly. Trump's stance on climate change has been,
Less than enthusiastic.
yeah, let's say less than enthusiastic. He's been skeptical of the science in the past.
Right.
And he even pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Agreement during his first term. So how do you see his return affecting global efforts to combat climate change?
There is no doubt that it's a cause for concern. Trump's policies could slow down global progress on climate action,
Yeah.
especially if the U.S., as a major emitter, continues to resist those international agreements and regulations.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a global solution to a global problem without the U.S. being fully on board, right?
Exactly. And it's not just about the U.S.'s direct actions. It's also about the signal it sends to other countries.
Yeah.
If the U.S. is seen as backing away from its commitments,
Yeah.
it could embolden other nations to follow suit.
So we're talking about a potential setback for the entire planet, a step backward in the fight against climate change.
It's a real possibility, but it's not a foregone conclusion. It's important to remember that the momentum for climate action has been building for years, you know, and it's not going to disappear overnight.
Right.
We're seeing cities, businesses, and individuals all over the world stepping up and taking action, regardless of what's happening at the national level.
So there's still hope. Even with the U.S. potentially taking a step back, the global climate movement is still strong enough to keep pushing forward.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
We're seeing a growing awareness that climate change is a global problem that requires a global solution,
Yeah.
and that awareness is driving action at all levels of society.
That's encouraging to hear. It sounds like there's a growing sense of urgency and like a determination to find solutions,
Yeah.
even in the face of these political obstacles.
Exactly. And that brings us to a crucial point: the power of individual action. Even though we're discussing these global events that seem so far removed from our daily lives, each of us has the power to make a difference.
You're saying that even in this like uncertain and complex global landscape, our individual choices still matter.
Absolutely. Whether it's making sustainable choices in our own lives, supporting businesses that are committed to environmental responsibility,
Yeah.
or advocating for policies that promote climate action. Every action we take can contribute to a more sustainable future.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not just passive observers in this global drama.
Right.
We're active participants, and we have the power to shape the course of events.
Exactly. And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive. We've explored some pretty heavy topics,
We have.
but we've also uncovered some, I think, glimmers of hope and highlighted the power of individual action.
Welcome back, deep divers. We're in the final stretch now of our exploration into the global ripple effects of Trump's return to the White House. It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
From potential currency wars to a new energy arms race.
Oh, yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
And it's clear that, the world is holding its breath, waiting to see what this new era of, Trumpian diplomacy will bring.
We've really dissected those anxieties,
Yeah.
the potential power shifts, the economic uncertainties. I mean, we've even pondered what a meeting between Trump and Elon Musk might look like.
Oh, yeah, that image is still stuck in my head. But for this last leg of our deep dive, I kind of want to bring it back down to earth a bit and talk about, what does all of this mean for the average person? The folks who aren't necessarily glued to the news, following every twist and turn of global politics. How will Trump's policies actually impact their day-to-day lives?
Yeah, I think that's a question we're all asking ourselves right now.
Yeah.
And while it's impossible to predict the future with, absolute certainty,
Of course.
the source does offer some insights into potential scenarios
Yeah.
based on what we know about Trump's America First agenda and his approach to governing.
Okay, so let's dive into those scenarios. What are some of the tangible ways that Trump's policies might, ripple out and affect people's wallets, their jobs, their communities?
Well, on the economic front, the e-book highlights the possibility of changes in trade policies, which could affect the prices of imported goods.
Okay.
So think back to our discussion about those European companies potentially relocating to Texas. If those relocations actually happen,
Yeah.
it could disrupt existing supply chains and lead to price fluctuations for certain products.
So that new phone you've been eyeing, or even just your everyday groceries, could end up costing a bit more.
Yeah, it's definitely possible.
That's something that would hit home for a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just consumer goods that could be affected. Remember we talked about the U.S. dollar's dominance potentially waning?
Yeah.
If that happens, and alternative currencies like the euro or the yuan gain more traction,
Right.
it could have a ripple effect on global currencies,
Oh.
potentially impacting things like inflation and interest rates.
So not only could our favorite imported treats get more expensive, but our money itself might have less buying power. That's a double whammy.
It is a complex situation with a lot of moving parts, and it's hard to say exactly how it will all play out, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. And speaking of keeping an eye on things, we also need to consider the potential impact on jobs.
Right. That's a big one. Trump has talked a lot about bringing manufacturing jobs back to the U.S.,
Yeah.
but how realistic is that? And what are the potential downsides?
It's a tricky issue. The ebook acknowledges that Trump's focus on revitalizing American manufacturing, it could create job opportunities in certain sectors,
Yeah.
but it also points out that this could come at the expense of jobs in other areas.
Yeah.
So it's a complex equation with potential winners and losers.
So some people might find new opportunities, while others might face job losses or uncertainty. It sounds like a bit of a mixed bag.
It is. And it's crucial to remember that these economic impacts won't be felt equally across the board.
Right.
Different regions, industries, and income levels will experience the effects in different ways.
It's like that butterfly effect, right?
Exactly.
A small change in one part of this system can have these far-reaching and often unpredictable consequences in other areas. Speaking of unpredictable consequences, I'm curious about the potential social and political impacts of Trump's return. We know his rhetoric and policies have been, divisive in the past. Could we see those divisions, deepen both in the U.S. and on the international stage?
It's definitely a concern. The source highlights the potential for increased polarization and social unrest, both domestically and internationally.
Okay.
Trump's America First approach, while appealing to some, could also alienate allies and embolden adversaries,
wait.
creating new tensions and potentially undermining global cooperation.
So more division, more conflict, more uncertainty. It's a pretty daunting picture. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm wondering if there's anything we can take away from all of this that's not completely doom and gloom. Is there any reason for optimism, any potential silver lining in this cloud of uncertainty?
Well, I think the key takeaway here is that we're living in a time of just unprecedented change and uncertainty.
Yeah.
The old rules of the game are being rewritten, and the future is far from certain. But this also presents an opportunity for critical thinking, engagement, and action.
You're saying that even though the future seems uncertain, we're not powerless to shape it.
Exactly. We need to stay informed, analyze the information we're receiving, and participate in constructive dialogue about the world we want to create. We need to engage in critical thinking, challenge assumptions, and be open to new ideas and perspectives.
So it's not about passively accepting whatever comes our way.
Right.
It's about actively shaping the future, even if we can't predict exactly what that future will look like.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive.
Wow.
We've explored the anxieties, the uncertainties, the potential risks and opportunities, and hopefully we've equipped you, our listener, with some insights to help you navigate this new world order.
Well said. And remember, deep divers, knowledge is power. The more we understand about the forces shaping our world, the better prepared we'll be to make informed decisions, engage in meaningful conversations, and, contribute to creating a future that we can all be proud of. Thanks for joining us on this journey.